everyone, and welcome to a very special Digital Foundry presentation. So a couple of months back we found out about the existence of a port for The Witcher 3 for Nintendo Switch, which sounds absolutely insane. Then it was officially announced, and well, my friend and colleague Tom Morgan actually got to see the game last week. So Tom, clue us in on what's going on here.
Right, so ZDPR invited me down to the Nintendo offices in Windsor, of all places, to see the game. Well, basically they had several journalists in to play it in portable mode. The idea being, obviously, that the big selling point of the Switch is to have it finally in your hands on the go. And genuinely, I jumped in and thought, well, what can we expect? You know, this is one of the most demanding titles of the generation, in the same running as, say, Doom or Wolfenstein in terms of the ambition of the port. So I went in a bit cautious, but in the end, I didn't need to be, because actually it's turned out remarkably well. All things considered, first impression really was, okay, this is on the portable screen, it's a bit blurrier. You know, they've gone for a dynamic 720p here, which definitely shows, and it definitely shows it going below 720p a lot of the time. But I will say, Rich, that CDPR were very, very transparent, and I think very keen to prove just how solid this conversion is, because they had the save states for several major places in the game. One of which was our perennial favorite, Crookback Bog and Novigrad Town Center. So they clearly knew that there would be close scrutiny on certain areas. And the questions obviously both of us had going in was, how would these extremely taxing areas, which, you know, pulled the PS4 version down to, say, 20 FPS, how would they hold up? So yeah, I got to see all of that, all of the Blood and Wine DLC side. Obviously this is an all-in-one edition, all the DLC and the extras all bundled into one 32GB cartridge. So yeah, that's what I had going into it.
Okay, good stuff. But we've also got something like 7 to 8 minutes worth of capture of the game running docked as well. So in this video, we'll be able to pretty much cover all bases, at least in a preview form, right?
That's it, yeah. So portable and docked to some extent.
Okay, so the thing that interests me here is that you actually had the ability to talk directly with a CD Projekt RED senior producer, is that right? That's
right, yeah. They were very accommodating, and they were very keen to just get our feedback in a way, just to know, okay, how's it looking, you know, from a technical perspective, because obviously it's an ambitious project. And to handle that, it's actually handled by Saber Interactive. CDPR actually informed them basically throughout the work of it to make sure they've got the assets they need, and the insight into how the engine works also comes from them. So it's been integral to getting this working, but a lot of the heavy lifting, from what I understand, is by Saber Interactive. Right, okay, they've previously done stuff like Halo 1 and 2 Anniversary, right? Yes, that's right, yeah.
Okay, yeah, good stuff. So, I mean, we've got some new information here, obviously. Now, when I did the lash up of Tegra level GPU on the PC side, I mean, it was touch and go as to whether we could actually get the game running smoothly at all. But what we're seeing here does seem pretty impressive. Now, obviously, there do need to have been some compromises, and I understand that CDPR were pretty open about how they've actually made this happen. So why don't you run us through that?
Yeah, I think they had to be, really. I mean, you go into this looking for more the positives. Hey, it's running portably, isn't that amazing? And so when I asked CDPR, okay, so what's the downside? They really openly explained, like, okay, so we've got, you know, the RAM limits on Switch. They have to incorporate compressed textures and compressed audio as well to make a lot of this happen. I believe it's 3.5 gigabytes of allocated memory on Switch for developers. So that's definitely something I had to work around compared to PS4 or Xbox One. Okay, so that in itself, the textures and the sound, when you start the game, you notice the resolution has been dropped generally. But when you get close to ground textures or like even the skin shaders, you do notice that there's been a downgrade, but because of the lower resolution on the screen generally, it kind of doesn't show up as obviously. It's a bit closer to what we get on PC at low. Sound as well is lower bitrate, and it seems like both of these cutbacks help to store the game on that 32GB cart, as well as being better optimized for Switch's memory. Now, I will say audio was never compressed to a point that it sticks out, which is something I was a bit worried about going in, bearing in mind the way Dark Souls turned out and Assassin's Creed 3. Besides that, in terms of getting it running, CDPR told me it was a matter of managing the Switch's GPU, CPU, and memory in tandem, and they kind of optimized each in turn, going from one to the next, as Saber worked through all the areas when they started working on the game around 12 months ago. So they told me they used the Kaer Morhen area as a vertical slice at first, interestingly just to see the combat systems working, and then they moved on to the more open world areas. I think the bigger issue, maybe the more noticeable part of that, is if you see the B-roll footage here, you can see like lots of the foliage is really sort of blurry just because they're using a lower res transparency. But besides that, actually it's remarkable how much they've crammed in. The draw distance is pretty much as it was.
Right, so we're talking about draw distances there, but I think it's pretty clear that they have been pulled in just a little bit, and you can see stuff like shadow cascade pop in on the B-roll assets, I think. So I think there has been some tweaking there.
Yeah, for sure. To be honest, this might be one of the most complete open world games I've seen on Switch in terms of not like reining in draw distances or anything. I think the closest we've got to it is something like maybe Ark. I don't think there's anything quite like it on the system. And it's definitely involves careful memory management as you walk across a giant world and you've got to stream in all these assets so quickly. And to be honest, I didn't notice much in the way of pop-in. There is fade-in, obviously. Some elements like grass particularly can pop in a bit closer to your feet, but what I saw, if you do kind of a panning shot across the plains near Novigrad or something like that, you know, it's incredible how much of a reach this engine is getting away with. One of the big takeaways I got from the interview with CDPR was that the NPC count in places like Novigrad is actually on par with the PS4 version. The catch there being that the draw distance on those has been reined in, so you'll see them kind of fade in as you run around the town. But otherwise, I think that's pretty good going. It basically speaks to how determined Saber and CDPR were to cram in the full experience onto Switch.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, it all looks really, really impressive. And, you know, this handheld footage, I think, is gold because it actually shows what the handheld experience is, you know, and the fact that they were open about that, bearing in mind they've got so little GPU and CPU resource to play with, is to their credit, I think. And I guess we can talk just fleetingly about performance here because the B-roll looked pretty solid, but when I look at your handheld footage, it's not quite as solid as the docked B-roll by the look of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. You know, the B-roll, I think they can cut around a little bit just to give it its best showing, but with my hands-on with the portable mode, obviously the GPU clocks in portable mode are dropped, which may not help matters, and who knows how docked play will run in the final build, but it is targeting 30 and it can hit that, but do expect drops to kind of the mid-20s. Just going by eye, I was looking at it thinking, yeah, this is 20 to 30 FPS range when you go to places like Novigrad and Crookback Bog. I noticed quite a few kind of stutters and hiccups along the road as things streamed in. Never enough to really kill the experience. It's definitely passable and acceptable, all things considered, but yeah, do expect that range. So we're talking like, you know, Doom, Wolfenstein levels of understanding of what the game is in terms of its ambition versus the hardware we've got in our hands.
Well, I actually think it's significantly more ambitious. Doom was a 60 FPS game
yes,
that was dropped down to 30 on the Switch, plus it had the swinging resolution drops, and even then it would still have performance issues. But at the same time, what we've got here is a 30 FPS PS4 and Xbox One game that is still targeting 30 FPS on the Switch, and it's got massive deficits in both CPU and GPU, and there it is. It seems to be mostly intact, and you know, certainly as a handheld it looks quite remarkable. But let's talk about the docked footage here, because we've been able to match up some of the clips there with the PlayStation 4 version, right? So what are your takeaways?
So yeah, the B-roll came in and it looks like, well, to be honest, this isn't the selling point of the Switch version, I don't think, but if you're going to put them side by side, it's going to really bring to bear how much those foliage elements have really been dialed down. We've got that classic shot which we always used in our early performance analysis, with that town being kind of overrun by frost and it's been besieged, there's fire, there's loads of effects, lots of foliage elements, the ambient occlusion as well. It looks blurrier because of the resolution cuts, and it's 720p dynamic, obviously. Actually, speaking of which, the ambient occlusion on the Switch version was added since the E3 build. So I was told this by CDPR themselves. They got kind of feedback after that. Well, they certainly noticed there was some commentary on it, and they decided to reinstate ambient occlusion from the other console builds. It's a bespoke form of it. The method is different to what we have on the other consoles, but it's now there, which means that you get that much fuller look under foliage elements and all the rest of it. So that all goes hand in hand with this philosophy of let's give Switch owners the full package. So I've noticed, like, playing it portably as well as seeing in the B-roll here, you getting things like light shafts, you're getting the motion blur toggles are both there. In the settings you can turn them off as always, but you've got the full screen velocity based one and the other form of it as well. So no holds barred, they've definitely gone all in to give us as much of the full feature set as they can. On top of the post-process effects, which are all working and as they were, you still have decapitation physics in combat and the water physics while swimming. Shadow quality is dropped, I noticed, and the lower quality transparencies mean the White Orchard, for example, doesn't look as lush as on PS4, plus it's less dense generally. But even so, the world still looks kind of full on its own terms. A few other distinctions to make versus PS4 here. Geometry is practically identical as we saw in the reveal trailer on Switch, but I noticed a few small details have changed, like foliage sway is reduced in this build-up to fighting the Griffin. Might be a coincidence, but maybe a physics tweak to cater for Switch's CPU. But you can obviously see a big difference there. FMV quality is also pared back, so in this side-by-side we see Switch dropping to 720p with more compression all round. You obviously get the same quality visuals within that encode, but the quality is lower to help fit it on the cart, much like textures and sound. A quick word on loading times. I checked this out in portable mode, and from the main menu on Switch, I loaded a save to the central Novigrad market, taking around 1 minute 24 seconds. On PS4, that comes in a little less at 1 minute 15 seconds, so it's very competitive, very similar. But then again, Switch does have lower grade assets and sounds to move from the NAND memory to RAM, so all told, it's really, really good.
Right, so going back to this discussion point about whether this is the most ambitious Switch port ever, I think it's all going to come down to the quality of the results, which certainly, based on your early preview, sound really, really promising, and I actually can't wait to check this out. Now, is it the most ambitious Switch port? I'm going to say, well, obviously the jury's out for now, but I'd say it's in with the running here, simply because, as you said earlier, the open world is bigger than anything I think we've seen on the Switch so far. Performance certainly in the B-roll and you know, even in your handheld stuff, kind of, it's holding up. It's certainly playable. I think that's, you know, on the CPU side, that's a massive achievement. GPU side, I think they're doing a lot of stuff in terms of resolution scaling and settings tweaks to make that possible. But just the fact that a 30 FPS game with a really high level of graphical fidelity is recognizably the same on the Switch is quite remarkable. And the new Switch will actually be running this under 10 watts docked based on my tests of the new hardware so far, which is just kind of mind-boggling in a way when current generation consoles have literally got about 10 times higher power consumption. So I think this is really, I can't wait to see it, simply because I still don't quite believe that it's real, even though I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
But yeah, I really can't wait to check this one out.
Yeah, easily one of the most impressive Switch games I've played. With all the caveats aside, the texture compression stuff, the sound compression stuff, that doesn't matter when you consider the scale of what they're going for here. But that's all I have for now. I guess the next time we'll be looking at it will be nearer its release later this year, I believe. So we'll be back with more when it comes out. But for now, thanks so much for joining me, Rich.
No probs whatsoever.
And if you did like or enjoy this video, please feel free to like or subscribe. And don't forget to ring the bell to get notifications as they land. Also, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. And to get in direct contact with myself or Rich, just use Twitter. But from the both of us, thanks for watching.